Hello, my name is Ray Archuleta. Today I'm going to talk about my journey. Uh, I'm a retired conservation agronomist and a soil scientist, and I retired from USDA, NRCS. And today I'm going to talk to you about the right how cow plants and biology can heal the land. And I'm going to talk to you about my journey and how I learned that how to help farmers heal their farms, their ranch, and their operations. And so I want to start off expressing how I have traveled in the last 18 months in 66 continents. I have been in every state, and I find a common pattern among producers and and not just producers, but technical people and scientists. And I'm going to talk about those four major concepts that I think are very critical on how you can heal your farm, your land, and start looking at the natural system from a more correct, holistic perspective. One of the first things I start noticing is, and very critical, is mindset. Mindset is so important. And I'm going to talk about how your mindset dictates how you look at the natural world, how you have relationship, how you deal with the physical realm, and even the spiritual realm. Mindset is absolutely critical. And as I go through all over the country, I've noticed that the mindsets that we learn in our universities and our schools through social conditioning has really impacted and has really impacted the land significantly. Another thing I want to talk to you about is, again, social conditioning. Social conditioning is brutal. Why we have taken us so long to heal the land is because of social conditioning. I'm going to build on social conditioning and explain how social conditioning impacts all kinds of truth, and they act like filters with mindset. Social conditioning. Social conditioning is really the family, humans, the interactions, how we disseminate with truth and how we deal with truth and how we suppress it in social condition, how we learn it in our universities, our churches, our school. We'll talk about that some more. Another thing I want to talk to you about is reductionist science. I've realized how reductionist science has been around for a long time, and probably the turn of the 1600s or even sooner than that. But reductionist science is looking at things in little pieces and not looking at it as a holistic whole. And that kind of thought process doesn't work very well in biological systems, and I'll show you that in a second. And then um, the main goal, as I go all over, as I go all over the country and work with our agency people, and I never was taught this at the university. I never really understood in agrosystems or what I was doing with farmers and ranchers. Nobody ever told me that our really goal is to how do we mimic nature's design, its architecture, its patterns, its principles, and how to use the right tools to heal it. And we'll talk about that. So, what got me to do a credible paradigm shift? What changed me? Well, the first thing that really started to get me to change is I was seeing failure as a conservationist. My job was to help heal the land, how to stop uh, water erosion, how to stop wind erosion through NRCS. And this is what I noticed was a global problem. It was not only a national problem, and it still is a global problem. And one of our biggest problems throughout the United States is the lack of infiltration and runoff. Another thing that really bothered me when I was living in Idaho, and I started to see, I was going through a paradigm shift. I was seeing that we couldn't fix the land. We were spending billions, having a lot of water. And the other thing was my farmers were going broke. Farmers were going broke. And I couldn't understand why my farmer friend who farmed 500 prime acres in Idaho couldn't bring his son into his operation. Well, as I started learning and going through this journey, this paradigm shift, started to realize that a lot of our issues is right here. And I think that a majority of the farm income, if you look at this chart that really represents the Canadian net farm income since 1926 to 2020, also kind of mirror image of the United States. A majority of the wealth is going to ag business, and very little is coming into the farm. You can see In fact, the losses in 2006. This is a very common trend. As you travel through the whole country, this is a common trend as you see. As I drive all over the United States, I see rural America going broke. The wealth and the blessings of the land used to flow from the farmer through the rancher to the local community. Now it flows to corporate America. Another thing that helped me shift my mind was uh, this book and Ellen Savory. Ellen and all the suffering that was going on in rural America and the lack of millions and millions of dollars, billions of dollars spent, and the water wasn't cleaning, created this butterfly effect on me. And it created a change in me to start to look at things holistically. Ellen was the one that kind of helped me peel the scales of reductionism. And this book was very powerful. And I definitely recommend it. And so that now I go as a holistic mindset to go all over the country to teach about agriculture. And a lot of people don't realize that right now in Europe, this is a huge disruption happening in Germany and France. And a lot of this is because of the way we have taught agriculture and we've industrialized it, and how governments and world governments and are pushing against because of climate change. And they're saying, how do we heal the land? How do we stop the polluted water? And a lot of their solutions is we'll just buy farmers out, which is not. It's about what I'm going to talk to you about and teach you today in this little slide, this whole journey this pictorial journey that I'm going to share with you on how really the land could be healed from a holistic perspective, and how we can heal the planet, the farms and ranch, and our health. And so one of the biggest things I start to realize is what really is destroying our soils is, I call it death by tools: tillage side, overhaying, over fertilizing, over using too much pesticides. And these are the things that are killing our soil. And it's because of a lack of understanding and a lack of a relationship and understanding the power of connectedness in one. That's the issue that I see. If you look at this picture, it shows you the forest soil. All of our soils at one time in North America and globally were once like this forest soils. Please understand that the farm came from a forest or a prairie. And it, from the left, it shifted to the conventional system that we have now. We have lost huge amounts of organic matter globally. And I think that people focus so much on climate change, but I think we missed the real issues. And I'll build on that point in a second. I will argue that what's the biggest thing that's happening is we have destroyed and diminished our soils, which has impacted the small cycle, water cycle and the large water cycle. And we've actually impacted biodiversity. My biggest concern right now is the lack of the destruction of biodiversity in our soils, which can be healed very, very quickly. And let me explain that, and let me develop that thought process a little more. What I'm going to show you here is, this is a NASA model of CO2, and this was shown in Kiss the Ground. So please watch Kiss the Ground documentary, and I explain this. But I just want to show you this is why there's such a disruption in Europe and Germany and all over the United States. And we're pushing many farmers, many people in the agriculture industry, because we're blaming climatic change on this one thing. I want to make a very quick argument here and make a point. In biological systems, there is never just one thing. It is a web of interactions. There are multifaceted things going on. What I want to show you is this picture here is a circle, is a picture of North America. This red plume here is CO2 gas. Please understand, since 1970s, 78, this CO2 has been going up, but it's only 0.04 parts per million % of the whole atmosphere. One of the things we never talk about, or other scientists have never talked about, and the 1978 Jimmy Carter Commission knew this, that there's a gas even larger, by 900 times bigger, is water vapor. I want you to look at this date of the NASA model, and you'll find this. Just type NASA CO2 model. But I want you to look at the date. It's in January. But I want to ask, and I'm going to present this little comment to the group that are listening to this video, how come all of a sudden in 3 months, you'll see this huge red plume increase? Did everybody turn on the factory? Did everybody um, uh, just drive their vehicles all of a sudden? What happened? I will argue in April, something tremendous happens, an incredible disruption all in North America in agriculture. Tillage. Tillage releases huge amounts of CO2. As you wake up, coprotrophic bacteria, they start to cannibalize the organic matter and release CO2 in the atmosphere. In 3 months, look at the color. It went from that color to this color. And look what happens in June. In the next 2 months, all the CO2 is drawn down.
Yeah.
Why? Corn and soybean are growing and sucking the CO2. What I am arguing to you is that look how quick our planet responds, how resilient it is. And so I also want to make another point, and this just was recently published and called in the Applications in Engineering in the Military University of Poland and some other prestigious research that's been done. And they quote, ever since there's been an elevation in CO2, there has been a 33% increase in agriculture yields. We have taught the general public that CO2 is this horrible poisonous gas. It's not. Without it, we would not have life. There would be no vegetation. Another thing a lot of people don't want to talk about, there has been a global greening in the recent decades by satellite imagery, an 8% increase in vegetation cover. Why is this important? I'll come and build that point later and talk to you about it in a second. I'm going to argue to you that what we're going to learn today, there's something much more critical that is happening. It's CO2 is just a symptom. There are 4 ecosystem processes that I feel that is happening in the planet and why we're having such disruptions in the water cycle, the small water cycle, and we're having this climate alterations. First is I'm going to show to you that we're not capturing enough sun. A majority of our country is not capturing sun. We capture sun for about 130 days. That's it. Changing photon light into chemical energy. I call it liquid sun to feed microbes. And keep in mind that it's diversity. This is the software of the planet. Matt and I were talking about it. Diversity is the software of the planet. Our phone is absolutely worthless without the software. The software that runs insects, plants, animals, viruses, all this life helps mitigate the water cycle, helps mitigate the nutrient cycle. It is a living planet. This is the way it functions. These 4 processes are disrupted, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. And it's all connected to the soil. A lot of us don't realize this little cute, nice little video shows that 40% of our inland rain comes from inland, and 60% of the rain comes from the ocean. I want to make a very critical point here. A majority of our rain, 40%, comes from inland vegetation. And the issue is our country and our globe is the major problem we have is our soil is naked because it doesn't have its covering, which is vegetation. It's hungry because it's starving to death because we're only capturing sun and not feeding the microbes. It's thirsty because we're losing a lot of latent sensible heat and it's running a fever. So what we have done is perpetuated global ignorance and global disconnectedness, and we have said it is one singular thing. It's CO2. It is not. I argue this is the major issue, that our soils are starving, they're hungry, thirsty, and they're running huge amounts of heat that is being trapped by the CO2. Remember, I already showed you how much CO2 is being released into the atmosphere. Huge copious amount, not just from other anthropogenic factors, but we never consider agriculture. Another thing is I start to research that 20 to 30 some percent of our surface on the planet is bare ground. Ladies and gentlemen, look at that picture. That's the West. That's New Mexico. That's Arizona. That's Nevada. That's a great portion of our country looks like that. It was not like that. It was once a grassland. It is now reflecting huge amounts of heat. Does that affect the climate? Yes. Even scientists just recently published a great paper that the evaporation model wasn't working out. They found out it's not just heat, but it's light that's reflection off the surface that's also causing more evaporation. So it's very critical to understand we have crusted soils on a large scale in a majority of the throughout the earth and allows no infiltration and they don't even breathe and they're crusted. Those were once vegetated areas. Let me show you. This is the thing, is the results. And I've been working on this for 30 years, and our agency has been doing this for 89 years. Look at the photo in 2014. And notice, Matt, I have purposely put here an organic system. A lot of times we have a lot of pushback from organic farmers because some farmers are using some herbicides. And I'm saying, please, folks, don't focus on the tools, focus on the lack of understanding. I have seen the most destroyed farms are organic farms, way too much tillage. Please look at that date, 1935. We have destroyed a majority of our soils in an organic system. There was no herbicides. I just put that on purpose. So I just want to show you this is still happening on a global scale. Just a year ago, people died in Illinois, and we're still having this problem. And we have spent billions of dollars doing this. We have some of the best universities. This is a perfect example of reductionist science and misplaced government policy. So this allows, because we have been taught very reductionist science, you can see the 100th meridians line somewhere in Iowa, Illinois, in this area. On this line, majority of the winter looks like this: bare ground, uncovered, not capturing sun. On the other side of the 100 meridian, and by the way, the 100 meridian is moving eastward. I grew up here, and I just want to show you, I was born in 1961. I graduated from school at New Mexico State University. Range, this was the past. This is now, reflecting heat. And now we're creating this, what you call, I call them, and I haven't coined the phrase, but it's called sky rivers, where there's copious amounts of vapor, water vapor I was talking about. And where's that? Where is that water supposed to be? It's supposed to be in the soil pore. I don't think people realize that the soil is probably the third, fourth largest reservoir of water. It's in the soil. But where is it? The CO2 of the water is in the atmosphere. And there's no tree and no plant capturing that and keeping it in the vegetation in the pore. Rivers and lakes are way distant. Please understand, a lot of this water vapors needs to be in the soil. So we're having a lot of this blanket effect. We have a lot of bare ground. And then this is the effect. North Carolina just had massive, absolute flooding. It was a catastrophe. New Mexico and Roswell just had massive flooding. So what's going on? These sky rivers. So we have this no longer consistent rain patterns. Either we're very dry or we get these massive amounts. So if you want to learn more about this, I think Walter Yenning is probably the most brilliant person that's talked about a dysfunctional water cycle. What we have, folks, is that we have those four ecosystem processes are disrupted. We're not capturing enough sun. We don't have enough vegetation. We have a disrupted water cycle. We have a disruptive nutrient cycle because we're over fertilizing, don't have a good microbial community and balance in our soils, and we are lacking biodiversity. So it's not one singular thing. It's four of these ecosystem processes. And how do we get people to understand this? Right here, folks. This is my biggest battle. Social conditioning, it's that mindset. How we've learned in our universities, our communities, our schools, we in our churches, we have learned reductionism, and we learned these paradigms that my dad taught me this way, my father taught me this way, my parents taught me this way. This is what the way I was taught. And it makes it very difficult to bring any new concepts and thought process into the local community, into church groups, into the university. In fact, I was almost kicked out of the university. They didn't want me to come and speak in one of the universities because they didn't want me to talk about regenerative agriculture. Please understand that our government and corporate America controls the thought process and the mindsets of how in the industrial model, the industrial and the military complex and the industrial models are controlled. Follow the money. I want to create a new t-shirt, Matt. It says, I trust in science, depending who paid for it. COVID is a good example. And so I question everything. We'll talk about that. So social science, social conditioning. What is, I think this is a great little video, and I don't know if the video will come through, but it's, and we'll see if it does. And if it doesn't, Matt, we'll leave the video and you can splice it in there. And here's this little video. Can you hear it, Matt?
A group of scientists placed five monkeys in a cage, and in the middle a ladder with bananas on top. Every time a monkey went up the ladder, the scientists soaked the rest of the monkeys with cold water. After a while, every time a monkey went up the ladder, the others beat up the one on the ladder. After some time, no monkey dared go up the ladder, regardless of the temptation. Scientists then decided to substitute one of the monkeys. The first thing this new monkey did was go up the ladder. Immediately, the other monkeys beat him up. After several beatings, the new member learned not to climb the ladder, even though he never knew why. A second monkey was substituted, and the same occurred. The first monkey participated on the beating for the second monkey. The replacements repeated until what was left was a group of 5 monkeys that, even though never received a cold shower, continued to beat up any monkey who attempted to climb the ladder. If you asked the new group of monkeys why the beatings took place, the answer would probably be,
well, I don't know. That's just how things are done around here.
Folks, this happens in our churches, our universities, our communities. Grandpa taught me this way. My dad taught me this way. And if you question, even in the family, and somebody comes up with they condition you, stay in your lane, bro. Social conditioning is everywhere where you work, in your workplace. You need to understand when it's humans, social conditioning happens. Another thing that's really hurt us is this. This is my university. There's a great picture that represents my university studies. I spent 8 years in the university learning chemistry here, biology here, entomology here, agronomy here, broke it up into fragments. But not one professor, not one person told me, Ray, you need to learn to understand that all those things are connected and to start looking at things in holism. So what the problem is, reductionist science does not work well in medicine for chronic disease, and it does not work well with working biological systems. What do I mean? When you're dealing with chronic disease, you need to look at things as a collective whole. You're not just a thumb or a nose or an ear or a liver. You're a collective whole working together, and it's connected. It's a systems approach. Same thing when I'm dealing with the soil and ecosystems. Holism, see the whole. Now, what I do to teach people about the power of life, I love showing this slide. Growing up in the West, this is a very common thing to see up in the Rockies. And I tell farmers, look at that compaction. How in the world does that tree survive that compaction issue? How does it do that? That plant is so powerful because it builds relationship with bacteria, fungal, they break rock down, excrete these powerful enzymes, these excretions. Also, they respirate CO2, comes in contact with water, carbonic acids. Life does that. Life has the power to take the mineral out of the geology. I tell people soil without plant and without microbial life is just geology. It's life that brings it out. I never understood that. There's a great picture to show a gypsum seabed in Australia. And I tell people, well, how come it's dark on the top? How come it's dark? Life, the power of life. What can biology do? The microbial and the plant community are powerful. So one of the things I've learned is that the plant and soil are one. They're they're not separate units. And the way we teach it, I think is absolutely horrific. Remember, the mineral is just the matrix. But without the plant and soil and the microbial community and the soil ecology, you don't have life. It's not soil. Here's a beautiful picture of aggregation and how the pores, I call them the aggregates, I call them the lungs of the soil, the alveoli. They are the air sacs. Without them, there's no infiltration. Without them, there is no completion of the water cycle. Microbes do that. Fungi do that. Living plants create those aggregates, these little BB structures, these little pore structures, this chocolate cake to create aggregates. And it all starts with this. The living plant feeding a myriad of biology to feed this little beautiful micro cows. I love this little video to show the power of life. This is why you who attend math class, it's why it's so important to understand. A lot of my agronomists, a lot of I consult all over the world, agronomists, and they don't understand this basic concept, the power of the micro cows and how they change and they run that underworld. And then one of the things we forget, it's not just the microbial community on the bottom, but it's that first 2 or 3 inches on top of the surface, this living dynamic skin, all of it together. It's called soil ecology, all of it together. And this is what working together in synchrony help bring the minerals out of the rock. We know that this material here broken down is about 35% of this goes into making humic and non-humic material, and the rest of it goes into the atmosphere. It's not a waste. It's designed that way. That's a living skin. So the more you till that skin, the more you spray it with fungicides and insecticides, you destroy it. I tell farmers ask me, well, Ray, why don't you do a soil pit for 5-6 feet? Oh, that's nice. I care about the first 3 inches. I don't get the first 3 inches right. I don't care about the next 7 feet. This is critical. This is where life dwells. So how do I get people to understand the power of biology and of life? This demonstrations. This is what we do, and we've been using this very effectively and very powerfully.
To fully appreciate the potential runoff and erosion from a conventionally tilled field like this, you really need to be out here during the most intense thunderstorm of the year. Since most people aren't willing to do that, here in Virginia we use a rainfall simulator to help our farmers tell the story of what happens when it rains really hard. On the left, we start with a tray of dry, loose soil taken from a clean till field. On the right, we start with a slice of intact surface soil from a long-term no-till field. This soil is not only protected with a mulch of cover crop residue, it also has a stable, porous sponge structure.
You know, years ago as a kid, I remember, you'd get these big heavy thunderstorms in the summer, and it would just wash the field, and you'd end up with mud down on the road. And I'm talking about mud that you'd go over there with a skid loader and scoop out of the way so the cars could go down the road. What I'm seeing now is I'm seeing these heavy rainfalls, and I'm barely seeing a trickle coming out of the field.
After we simulate an extremely intense thunderstorm for 5 minutes, the differences are obvious. Most of the water we applied to this soil has run off into this jar, carrying away with it a thin but very significant layer of topsoil. We just applied 1.5 inches of very intense rainfall to this bare, tilled soil. Obviously, we harvested very little for future plant use. Meanwhile, this no-till soil has absorbed virtually every drop of water we applied. What little ran off is clear. The bottom line is pretty simple. If you want to harvest more rain like these no-till farmers are doing, keep your soil covered on top and make it a sponge underneath.
You can see in the picture how well aggregated that soil. It's not just no-till by itself, cover crops together in a systems approach. It is this machine that has allowed us such incredible paradigm shift and created the regenerative movement, allowing the soil to speak. What I love about this machine, it shows the power of the 4 processes: capturing enough sun to create the cover crops, to feed the biology, to create the aggregates, to show a functioning water cycle, that biodiversity of covers, and the nutrient cycle. All these 4 processes are shown with this machine. I'm going to show you the next one for the grazing.
Difficult to realize the difference in rainfall runoff between a continuously grazed pasture versus a rotationally grazed pasture. To really see the difference, you actually have to be out there during the heaviest thunderstorm of the year. NRCS uses a rainfall simulator to demonstrate the effects of infiltration versus runoff on pasture surfaces. These pasture samples were collected from actual pastures just down the road from each other. One represents continuous overstocked and overgrazed pasture. The other represents a rotationally grazed and rested pasture. All rainfall runoff is funneled into a collection jug on the front of the demonstration table. This allows us to visually compare both the volume and clarity of the runoff.
The most important nutrient we have to manage is water. With rotational grazing, particularly during the summer, we have more water infiltration because we have a better cover on the ground. Essentially, the cover intercepts the water particle and allows it to enter into the ground versus running off.
By the end of the demonstration, it's amazing to see how much more runoff occurs on the continuous overgrazed pasture versus the well-rested, rotationally grazed pasture. Here you can see how much more water actually soaks in and absorbed under the rotationally grazed, well-rested pasture, and how much more water actually runs off the continuous grazed pasture. When it gets really dry and you get a big rainfall event, how do you want your pastures to perform when your forages need every drop?
What happened here, again, you can see this incredible machine, this demonstration machine called the Rain Simulator. As you can see here, this is an overgrazed pasture, and this is the pasture that's rested and allowed and move the cows like and mimic nature and move them frequently like the buffalo and the Serengeti, giving it rest. You can see how much water ran off. Nothing ran off here. And look how much infiltrated. Again, why? The impact of the loss of the aggregation. And here's another little demonstration. You can do this. You don't have to have it very expensive. Those other machines they're $6,000 a piece. I have one. But then you can actually use some glass containers or some plastic jugs and drill some holes, food coloring, and make a little plastic cup and make it rain. These are the same 2 soils. They're a mile apart. This is no-till with covers for 30-some years, and watch it start to drip. Look at right here. Look how the water ponds up on the top. Aggregation. See, that's how we have gotten people to change and see the power of biology. And another demonstration
I have a question to ask
is this
you.
one.
Is your soil healthy,
the slate
functioning,
test.
and stable? One of the best diagnostic tools that I know of is the soil stability test. Here are 2 soils, exactly the same soil type. This soil has been tilled for 30 years. It is addicted to chemicals and fertilizer. This soil has not been tilled in 40 years. It is covered with diverse plants year-round. It is completely weaned from chemicals and fertilizer. Watch what happens when we drop the soil in the water. Notice how the conventional till soil is falling apart. The biotic glues in the organic matter are burned up by tillage. The soil pores have collapsed. Look at the no-till soil. It's holding together.
Same
Soil is
soils,
falling apart.
mile apart, same soil type.
Do this test for yourself. I guarantee if you dig a little, you'll learn a lot.
So this farmer went from 5 herbicides down to 1. He was 80 years old, raised tires. Look at the soil's difference. He only used Roundup and occasionally, but always had the ground cover. Rotation, biodiversity, and this farmer, constant tillage. And what are the impacts? As you can see this little video, and we're going to skip it because of time, but this is a picture of Venezuela of 3 inches. Look what happens. The average rainfall in the United States, it can handle, the soils can only handle 1.5 inches. This is not on a global scale the problem. We don't have a runoff problem. We have an infiltration. Why? The tillage destroys the aggregates. You wake up these R. strategist bacteria, copotrophic. They eat the biotic glues and cannibalize and destroy the pore space. So here's what we do now. Once we use the machine, we teach them how to observe in the field, and we take this very powerful tool called a shovel. I tell people the window to the soul of a human being is the eyes. Ancients used to say the eyes are the window to the soul. The window to the soul of the soil is a shovel. I use a shovel to show people the design. Most people don't understand. There's a great paper called A Hierarchical Approach by Dr. Baer and Odom talking about the design of the soil. The soil has spheres, areas of design, detritus sphere, the skin, the porous sphere, where aggregates, and the rhizosphere and the agradosphere. Inside the agradosphere is the porous sphere. And the phyllosphere is the surface of the plant where epiphyte bacteria live, and the drillosphere. Here's all the spheres. Most people don't even know that soil has design. I can tell a lot by your soils. If any of those spheres are missing, it tells me that about your farming. Let me show you a great example of that right here. No-till without covers, just plain no-till. Look what happens with 3 years of cover crops. All the spheres are present. So please understand, soil has design, and you need to understand that without the design, those 4 ecosystem processes will not function, and the soil will not accept the water cycle. The water cycle will not work. It will not infiltrate. You won't have a complete nutrient cycle. Biodiversity of the microbes it's not functioning because we're not capturing sun. All those 4 processes happen on top of that design. It has to be present. Look what happens in a system where it's properly grazed and improperly grazed. Look what happens when you go to when I walk into a farm, I go to the fence row and I look at your farm. I look at your vegetable garden. I look at how you're farming your corn and soybean, whatever you're doing. Can you believe those are the 2 same soils? Just go to the fence row, grab the shovel, and here's what you're going to find. You're not going to like what you find out because what you've done. So now, wrapping it up, getting close. So what is the goal? Once I use the rain simulator, think about holistic, break the social conditioning with the rain simulator, teach the producers to think holistically. And then I told you the 4th point. What is the 4th point? Mimic nature. It's design, it's architecture, it's intelligent design. Mimic its design. And one of the most awesome websites I love is called Biomimicry Institute. I definitely recommend it. And look at the question of humility. Ask nature. The science that I learned was, didn't ask nature. How do we force nature? How do we force it and enslave it to do what we ask it? How do I get up every morning to see what I kill? What do I control? How do I force it for yield, yield, yield? I love this website because it teaches biomimicry, has been around for quite a while. We learned how to do Velcro by cockleburrs. Look at that design. And the name of the scientist is Billionaire. You know, we learned to fly, biomimicry. Look what a city would look like if it was designed by biomimicry. This is the way it would look. But this is the way our cities look. See the difference? If we follow nature's design, our design. And here's the results. Huge amounts of sensible heat. And anybody that lives next to a city understands that if you have a farm right next to a large city, it changed your rain patterns. Much heat. And here on the bottom, if we would add more trees, more vegetation, crime rate goes down, we knock the temperature, brings more CO2, be great. So what's my goal? I tell farmers, my goal is to teach you how to farm like the prairie and the forest. That's what I teach you. And the architecture, both have animals, both cover 24/7. They both don't use tillage. Diversity, 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 pretty simple. Follow the design. Look what we're doing in my gardens or when I work with farmers on large scales, we're putting cover crops on this large scale. So this is how we're changing the industrial system. The current model is like this: no respect and no understanding of the soil. I travel all over, and it's amazing to me how the majority of producers don't understand how the soil function, and that's just how I treat it. We are now in regenerative system, capturing sun and rolling the covers in this new model. How to nurture it, how to love it, how to mimic it. We also doing it with our current. I see in the future that these systems are going to be converted to this system. This pig brings $180 a pig. This one brings $1,200 to $1,500 a pig. The meat is delicious. It's nutritious. I tell people it's so good, like kissing your wife. It's scrumptious. I will never eat pork from here again. There's a lot of reason why a lot of young people want the Impossible Burger. They see systems like this. I see the future that regenerative is going to go from here, and it's starting to happen, and go into a system here. And then we can get nutritious meat and heals the planet. People say, well, Ray, regenerative agriculture can't feed the world. That's not true. The Darvis family can grow 6,000 pounds of vegetables in 1/10 of an acre, and they make $40,000 a year. Type their name in. They're located in Pasadena. I'm going to conclude here with my case study. One of my close friends, and it changed my life. And I'm going to share this with the rest of the group. If we can heal this desert environment where we get very little water and it's so hot, and we can use the principles of biomimicry, and we can move the cows, because we get a lot of pushback. The cows are the problem. Well, I will tell you, they are confused. We cannot heal the planet without cows. Keep hearing a lot of pushback with cows create methane gas. Well, how about the 7 billion people that release methane gas all the time? That is a stupid concept. It is not thinking things well. Animals have been around, and animals and humans releasing methane gas and all these gases. Please understand, in the 1950s, look at the elephants that were there. What if we can use cows to heal the planet and move them like these large herds? Let's watch what can happen. I went to college here. I grew up here in the northern New Mexico. I went to college here, and 4 hours here, south here, is one of the hottest, one of the very large deserts in North America. We're going to go visit Alejandro's ranch, La Dama's ranch, and we're going to see how biomimicry and holistic management change the landscape. And if we can do this here with an area that only gets 10 to 12 inches of rain, and it looks like that, and with temperatures like this, And 3 months of the year, they only get 10 inches. 10 inches. When I first, I've been to this ranch 5 times. 5 times. Look at the temperatures. We know, Matt knows, when you got temperatures over 105 degrees, you start denaturing enzymes in the soil. Look at the temperatures. Look what 2 cowboys moving the cows 800 times a year, and look what they do with fencing and moving the cows and moving them like buffalo, what it can do to the natural system. This is the Chihuahuan Desert. 2 cowboys moving the cows like buffalo. Isn't that incredible? The concept is take one healthy part of the ranch, move the cattle. There's a great paper called Mobile Link Organisms. Read that, an ecosystem functioning, how you can take organisms like bees, bats, cattle. They take, and this is called a good functioning part of the ranch, move the animals, import the seed and the manure to the other disrupted part of the ranch. So taking it from there and moving them to the more brittle environments. There's the cow carrying seed. And look how powerful the manure pie is. They're a walking vat of soil life. And you take this system that looks like this. And by the way, the scientists told us, the range scientists said this could never change because those plants are allelopathic and suppresses grasses. If you go from Albuquerque to El Paso, this is the way it looks. If you look at Nevada, if you look at Colorado, if you look at most of the West, California, Arizona, looks like this. Alejandro's ranch looks like this. Thank God his cows didn't read the textbooks that the range scientists were teaching. Look how quickly, 2015, look at that Elephant Butte. Cattle, first things come back is the healers, the weeds, and look what happened to the grasses. How powerful are cattle? Look what the cattle have done. You group them up tight. This rancher wanted to heal his mine, and that was all rock. And look what he's done with the cattle. It was all solid rock. It looked like this on the corner. Look what the cattle did. And biology and mycorrhizae. And guess what else it did? It also, when we restore the natural systems, the rain comes. Here's a nice little thing showing the rain. And I think we'll wrap it up with these last 2 slides. I love this where it says, Masanobu Fukuoka, if you have not read his books, I would recommend buying all his books. He said it was an American desert that I suddenly realized the rain does not fall from the heavens. It comes from the ground. Desert formation is not due to the absence of rain, but the rain ceases to fall because the vegetation has disappeared. A lot of you guys were saying, well, Ray, that's a lot of animals on a large scale. Tom Mitterchek has done it with 2 cows on 5 acres. 2 cows, 5 acres. He's learned to move it. The thing is, what I just talked to you about, folks, I'm going to go here. What is changing the country also? Right here. 70% of millennials read labels. They want food as medicine. This is why regenerative agriculture is growing. That's one of them. And again, let thy food be thy medicine. Farm salmon versus wild. Organic eggs, or you want range free. This is organic feed. That's what I'm saying. So again, I told you about mindset. I told you about social conditioning. I told you about reductionist science. And I told you how to mimic nature. That is the goal. Please understand the principles of regenerative agriculture. And a person that understands principles can choose his method. Leave you with this last thought. And this last slide, I think, would be very powerful. Again, principles. Understand how the principles of nature works. Understand holistic thought process. And I love this book.
The mistake I see smart people making is assuming that they're smart.
I love this book. Let me share this again. It's called You're Not That Smart. I read it. And look what Elon Musk said about smart people. And I think Elon's pretty darn smart. when he hires people. Look what he says.
The mistake I see smart people making is assuming that they're smart. They're not.
Yeah.
Like I said,
The things that people make is they think they're that smart. I'm going to tell you, I am not that smart. I have cognitive bias. I make logical fallacies. This book shows that a majority of people think they're very smart, they're very educated. In their hardcore reality, they're not. And they make a lot of mistakes. They had a researcher, a professor said, in a high school, in a room setting, a college room setting, he had the students write down on a blank sheet of paper, I want you to write a bicycle, and the only credit you get is if you draw the whole bike completely. No part missing. And everybody failed. Nobody could do that. So here's my point. We're not that smart. Work in a community, work together as a collective. So, Matt, I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. And I hope that, I'm sorry it was so long-winded, but I think what I'm trying to say is that this is the journey of the regenerative movement and how this is growing and how we use these powerful demonstrative tools and how people's lives are changing, and it's healing communities and it's healing the climate. With my phrase that I said in Kiss the Ground, I'll leave it with that. Healthy soil, Matt, that you're helping builds a healthy plant, healthy animal, healthy climate, healthy human. All of them are connected. So thanks, Matt. And we'll kind of just open it up and we'll talk some more. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Ray. Wow. That was incredible. Wow. I am just blown away. That was so amazing. I am so grateful.
Well, I paid you for saying that, so people know that. But you know, Matt, I had a hard time. I wanted people to see a different point of view that is growing, and that the soil and when people come to your class and they learn how important your class is, and how this lays over into landing, how to heal the land. If I was having consultants come, I would force them to come to your class. Because if they don't have that foundation and how the soil works, they're lost.
I appreciate that.
So I think it's very foundational. I taught myself, and so by reading copious amounts of book and just walking fields and stuff, I would, yeah. So it's what you're doing is very important. So great stuff.
Well, I really appreciate that. And it's you know, when you're tackling these big ideas, when we're trying to fix something that is systemic, it can feel daunting, and it can feel like you're going up against this huge system that everyone seems to just blindly go along with it. And when you break it down the way you break it down, it creates that pathway for all of us to see the common sense, to see the pragmatic, the way we can get out of this confusion, these narratives, and get back to real solutions, tracking really what's going on, and seeing a pathway that our farmers can take so that we can take back the wealth of the land, so that our soils can be again the bulwark of health and the bulwark of the stability of our civilization and our economy. I think that just seeing those side by sides was so incredible. Is it easier now that you have so much momentum and you have those case studies? Is it easier now to really convince people who are a little bit stubborn?
Well, I always take those demonstrations, Matt, especially when I'm going to work with a new group and I know there's going to be a large impact. You know, when I first started, Matt, I started with those little glass jars. And I'm going to tell you, when I first did that, I did it at Penn State, and I was shaken to death, my knees, and everybody did, all the scientists did PowerPoints, everybody did PowerPoints. And I said, they're going to laugh at me. They're going to mock me. I'm going to use those little jars and my little tubes and my slate tubes. Oh my goodness, did it connect with the producers? It's letting the soil speak to the producers and learning how to connect. Let the soil speak. And once the soil spoke and I collected the soils from their places and their management, and then the paradigm shift happened. I don't get the credit. I just drop seed. I just interpret what the soil's speaking to them. So that's what has caused the movement to be phenomenally powerful, the demonstrations and connecting and learning how to speak to them. And the biggest ignorance gap of every natural scientist in the field of range, plant pathology, not plant pathology, but range cropping, all the systems that we're talking, foresters know very little about soil ecology. It was not taught enough in this. If I would have had one of your classes, Matt, if I would have had somebody like myself bringing it in and bringing the demonstrations and putting it all together, it would have changed my life. And it's probably a good thing I didn't, because I would have gotten fired right away. Because once you see it this way, Matt, you can't handle it not seeing any other way. It changes everything. So
That's
it's
truth.
very huge. It changes
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, truth like that, doing that real hands-on shovel, the fence line versus the field. Oh my word. That it's so obvious. It's painfully obvious, like you said. Whew. So it's so fascinating. So it's not even about bringing in the past examples or even other farmers. It's about making the farmer kind of face himself. It's like looking it in the mirror.
with the shovel. And see, the thing is, Matt, you have to be informed. You have to be at your level. Your students need to understand. They need to understand what you understand. When I walk, I'm going to tell you a story. Several stories have happened. I had one guy that was really obstinate. I mean, he was really upset with me. We're in California. He was an organic farmer, and I was trying to help him. And he wanted to use a particular cover crop. And I said, hairy vetch is not what you want. You want to use cereal rye, because I love the grass because they pump more carbon, and his soils were degraded. And he got very tense with me, grabbed his shovel, and I walked, and he had a little wooded area that was 10 feet away. And I grabbed a chunk of soil from his wooded area, and I said, this is your organic farm. The organic farm was like pale, almost pale white. And the forest was dark, midnight black. And he was like, this was your soil at one time. And all of a sudden, it diffused him. I've done that with agronomists. Don't underestimate the power of the shovel. I had 80 agronomists, same thing. Soil was destroyed. And agronomists are the worst because they've gone to college. And the people that always study their fields, they're the worst, because sometimes they think they know too much in their field. It's like Elon Musk said, you're not that smart. Humility. The first part of this journey is humility. I've had to be humbled. I don't know anything, Matt.
Yeah, humility is the only way to always be open to greater learning and to see the other aspects and the greater detail on what you've already learned. That certainty is a blinder,
It's huge blinder. Intellectual arrogance. I can fix ignorance. I can't fix stupid. Stupid is when you're arrogant and you say, I already know too much. That's stupid. I can't fix that. That's a spiritual problem. But you can fix ignorance. We're all ignorant about something. And once you grasp that, that's why I really enjoyed that book. It really gave me perspective that humans don't make really good decisions. They're very biased. I tell people I am extremely, I've only met one non-biased scientist, Matt. They were dead. We're all biased, Matt. I'm biased. You know what I'm biased towards now? I was biased towards the industrial model. I'm biased now to God's creation. This is how it works. I judge all research papers through that lens now, through the creation lens, through the design. And this is like, I'm like a barnyard rooster. I learned how to pick the kernels of truth in a pile of research crap. There's a lot of it asking wrong questions. That's why I love that Biomimicry Institute. It's asking something very simple question. Ask nature. That's the premise of the foundation of science, especially ecological science, especially conservation sciences. How do we mimic nature? How do we mimic the design? How do you mimic your garden? How do you transform your garden and what you're doing? The design's there. Follow it. That's what I teach now. I am biased. Your students are going to hear my bias. I've learned it one way. I'm not going back that way. That caused failure. This way works. And that's what the regenerative movement is about healing, about mimic nature. That's simple. People ask me, well, what's regenerative agriculture? It's mimic nature so it renews itself. It's the changing of the heart and mind so that it renews. If your mindset doesn't change, the farm will not change. The ranch will not change. You're the problem. I tell my staff, I tell the people, you're the problem. I'm 99% of my problem. Once you understand that, Matt, life's good. That's why the good Lord gave me a wife. She reminds me of that all the time.
I love it.
Yeah. Any other questions, Matt, that you think that the people would like to hear? Or
Yeah, I think that especially in the gardening world, and especially in the cultivation indoor world, people are creating potting mixes, creating garden soils, they're doing raised beds, and everyone's trying to hit up like a certain number of soil organic matter. And at scale, at large farm scale, what's realistic a range for, let's say, Texas and New Mexico versus Massachusetts, Pennsylvania? You've been everywhere. And I know that for a lot of people, they just think it's one, but I know there's way more capacity to shift and hold a lot more in wetter climates and more cold temperate climates.
great question, Matt. I tell people, be careful with organic matter. It's only one indicator. I've seen soils in Colombia had 28% organic matter, and they were not cycling properly, and it was having some insect infestation. And it's not just organic matter. It is one indicator. I look at water-soluble carbon. I look fungal to bacteria ratio. You understand that better than I do. It's not one indicator. The moment, it's kind of like when you go to the doctor, man, the doctor looks at fecal, urine, CAT scan, saliva. It looks at many indicators as a collective whole. One soil sample will never tell you the complexity and the elegance of the soil. I look at aggregation. I look at many things. Don't look at just organic matter. Let me give you an example. In Arkansas, very hot, humid environment. It's 50, 60 inches of rain. Adam Chappell, you know Adam Chappell. Adam is a great farmer. Covers, does everything. He's just brilliant. But he can never build high organic matter because his soils are cycling so quick. Look at organic matter as this. Organic matter, 40% of organic matter is dead carcasses of bacteria. It's cycling. You know that. It also is, organic matter is the aggregates. It's these superbiotic glues. It's these incredible substances. It's not just dead material. It's an elegance of a soup of biochemistry that's phenomenal. It is elegant. You don't look at one indicator and say, "Oh my God, I've hit the mass here." When you go further north, you build organic matter more because it builds up and it freezes. It slows the microbial community. So when you go to North Dakota and you go Minnesota, they can build 7 to 8 to 10 to 12, 14%. New Mexico, where I grew up, if I have 3%, 2.5%, I'm rocking. If I got 3% in the desert, you understand that. In your area too. in these areas, in these more arid environments, if I got 2 or 3%, I'm good. But you know what I really look at? It's when Matt Powers trips in his yard and he gets it decomposed. Then I'm happy, whether it's 1 or 2%. Because it's cycling. I want cycling. I want that sucker the moment in a good way. That's why we love this. And you've seen this, Matt, where you take cotton underwear and bury it. Bury it in a conventional tilled soil. It'll be there for 2 or 3 months and it won't decompose. In a cover crop, no-till, fungal, living soil, it's gone in a week. The only thing that's left is the elastic for the underwear. That's what I want, Matt. There's many indicators, not organic matter. I'm telling the audience, careful. It's only one indicator. And another thing I like to use is saying all soil tests are wrong. Some are useful. That's why I use the Haney test. It's useful. Some of the fungal, the bacteria, the ones you know that you already understand your audience. You can train them. You already teach them on that. Careful with soil tests. The old test is a chemistry-based test. It's old. The Malick and all that, those are old tests. That's old science. It's not based on biomimicry. Haney test is based on biomimicry, using the 3 common acids of plants. So many indicators. And so be careful with just one. And I think the audience, so it depends on what part of the country you go to, 2 to 3%. 3% is great in New Mexico and the more arid environments, but it could be better in Minnesota and Iowa and Indiana, 10, 12, 8%. You know what the soil organic matter in most Iowa soils are at? 3 to 4%. There were once 10 or 12. So it depends on this, Matt. Beautiful word, my favorite word, and one of the principles, context. Climate, temperature, moisture, and the way you manage determines how much organic matter is going to build. You're not going to build much in Florida and with more humid environments. You're just not. It cycles too quickly. And it runs on water. Simple thing. I know it's a long thing, but I think they need to understand. I think sometimes people get enamored with organic matter. No, it's just one indicator.
That's so good. So good. So let's close with what's the number one advice you would have to new farmers?
The number one advice I would do is 2 things, Matt. Go to a school like yours. Go to a school like Elaine's. Number 1, educate yourself. Listen to YouTube University, the best in the world. Listen to some of the stuff that I have. Gabe Brown, some of these regenerative. YouTube University. Educate yourself. Pay the money. People will buy a $50,000 tractor, but they won't go spend $1,200 for a school. And they'll go broke. Understand your context. Teach yourself. Number 2, don't work by yourself. Do not work by yourself. Work in a community. Let me give you a point. Look, Matt, if a farmer's 30 years old, he's starting, and the good Lord gives him 60, maybe 50 more years, that's 80 years old, because the average life in the United States going down is about 76. But if you're giving 50 more years, it's not years, opportunities. Because when you're working with agrosystems, it takes a whole year to find out if this worked or not. Do your research yourself. Do your own little plots. Don't depend on other people. But if you have 4 or 5 in your community, now I've got 5 years of research in 1 year. Work in community. Don't work by yourself. Educate yourself. Work in community. And that is the most powerful thing I could tell you. It will change your life. And number 3, you're the problem. Humility. Mindset. Always never forget humility. You don't know it all. So I think those are the best 3 things I could tell people.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ray. That was incredible. I So grateful for the messages. So grateful for the clarity. So grateful for the deep insights. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Matt. I've spent a lot of years failing, but failing is opportunity. You need to fail. You need to see suffering. If it wasn't for the suffering, you can't see the joy. They coexist. And so we need those things so that we can learn the power of it. So thank you, Matt, for what you do, and thank you for your audience, and they'll learn a lot. And I think you're doing a great job, and you're the next generation. You're the next generation of teachers. As we become, it's like I told you, as I'm going to seed, I'm getting older. You're the next ones. You guys are the next ones passing the baton, how to heal the planet. And so we're excited about that. But thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Right.